good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is you are dialing in from. We are here, myself, Anissa Turan, with another segment of the entrepreneur mindset, and this time with Ian. Now, Ian, you're going to have to say your surname. Dommisse.
Dommisse. So it's Dutch for son of Thomas. So Dommisse.
A bit of history there for us. Please, for those that are joining, don't hesitate at always. I think we've lost our guest, but I'll continue with the intro. Don't hesitate to ask questions, add your comments whilst we're waiting for Ian to come back. Okay, he's back. What happened there, Ian?
I'm not sure, but I'm here. Nothing changed on my side.
Right. Are you back?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just gonna make sure that all my
okay. So whilst you're sorting out tech on your side, let me just introduce Ian. Ian is an architect and a passionate landscape designer. His biggest project to date is I don't know if you say it, Angama Mara, edible food, experiential garden in Kenya, an integral design feature of the prestigious luxury safari lodge. Okay, so you're going to let me get some tickets to go to the lodge, hopefully soon. It sounds captivating. Locally, he designed the Octopus Garden at the famous, for those that are my global guests, the V&A Waterfront in Cape Town, a great example of garden design led by permaculture principles. He has also worked on numerous residential gardens where the client's needs, architecture, and site surrounds are at the heart of his design process. I just want to say that Ian does everything with heart. So not just gardening. The other hat that he wears is the role of project manager of Grow SA. And that's where I got to meet Ian. More of that later. An organization which formed during the pandemic to boost the green economy through skills and human development. He gathers inspiration from nature and often finds beauty in plants and flowers that are often unnoticed. Now, the theme for today's conversation is around nurturing relationships which multiply. But I think if there's any person I can say that truly understands and embodies and just doesn't talk the talk but walks the walk of what shared value exchange is, I believe that I've met one of the very rare few, which is Ian. He understands that concept in practice, not just in talking about it. So I'm now going to hand over to him, and maybe he can just delve in a little bit about what this concept of nurturing relationships which multiply means. And I normally start with why did he start, or I ask entrepreneurs why they started, but I'd like to ask him how. So I've lost him again. Let's see what happened there. Let's get him back. So it's definitely, is it my side or is it your side?
No, it's all seemingly good on my side. I'm checking it here, but
okay. All good. Let's continue. Over to you.
Yeah. So thank you for that warm introduction and a lot of flattery.
Truth.
But yeah, I like that way that you started with thinking about the why. And this topic today, it's come for me because I've looked back at the last 5 years of working with one of my clients and how many directions the partnership has taken me in and the various types of impact that it's had. And I feel like there's so much meat in this kind of collaboration to talk about. But going back to the why, I think for me it really came about, how do we look at our environment and also our lifestyle and see all the things that we can do that are within our control that can have some kind of benefit and impact on the environment and our footprint.
And so some of this all started in COVID, though, or most of it. Just take us back on the journey.
Yeah. So it actually goes further back. It goes back to 2019 when it was Mandela Day was coming up, and the waterfront staff voted for the type of project that they wanted to support that year. And the two types of impact that they were looking to do was marine protection from plastic and food security. And so I was approached and I was asked to create a proposal and to see if we could make a raised vegetable garden at their head office. It was actually on a rooftop parking, and to use eco bricks to do so. And so that's kind of how the ethos or the ideation behind the Octopus Garden came about, which is an octopus-shaped vegetable garden that we created there at the waterfront. And now, 5 years later, we look back and that garden has yielded 18,000 kilograms of fresh produce, which has been donated to the project beneficiaries. And yeah, but it's had such a spiraled impact and sort of legacy. And one of the legacies has been when the garden was finalized, we suddenly realized that it was a good place to teach urban farming. And so at the end of 2019 and at the start of 2020, we started to use the garden and a few other places across the city to do a short course in urban farming. And so that was kind of the starting point. And then when the pandemic struck, one of the colleagues at the waterfront kind of put a few of us together and said, I can see that you're trying to do similar things. Why don't you guys chat and collaborate and see what can come? And we had an abundance of time at that point. And so the five of us met on a Tuesday morning for 12 Tuesdays in a row. And over that time, we fleshed out what I had started as a 2-week short course into a 6-month learnership. And that's how Grow A started. And so what it's become is it's a sort of a scholarship in which we find people that are having big impacts in the green economy within the Cape Town area. And rather than starting like new gardens, we wanted to find people who had already started either a food garden or a soup kitchen and boost them as a person, but then also their businesses through human and skills development. And so we did it as a trial for 8 candidates, and it went really well. And then since then, we've done 2 more cohorts. So we've done a total of 3 cohorts. And as a result, now we have an alumniship of graduates who are starting to work together, and it's been really beautiful to witness what's come out of the program.
Now, to come back just a few steps, it's a beautiful story. And it didn't start from only adversity during COVID, as you said. It really started with that bigger, I suppose, if you can tie it back to the UN Sustainability Development Goals for 2030, it was about food security, no poverty, education, skills development. So there was a number of bigger whys that was related to this. And other than it being a passion of yours in terms of, growing beautiful gardens and doing landscaping or being in that space, it was more than that. It was, how do I create this bigger sustainable impact for the different I suppose, as you called it, beneficiaries, but at the same time, whilst conserving, whether it was the ocean when you're talking to the waterfront, whether it was, our environment just overall. And that's the story, that's the heart-based stories that I love to hear, because often people will talk about why they started, and it was like, oh yeah, I just wanted to start a business so that I can build a bit of a legacy, and but it's never just that. So
Mm.
I quite enjoy that you were telling us a little bit of that story. May I ask if you are able to share the beneficiaries that are now receiving the fruits of the labor of that Octopus Garden? I mean,
Mm.
who are they? Can you share a bit about them?
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was two organizations. It was Ladles of Love,
Hmm.
who before COVID, they could use the type of quantities of produce that we could yield in a meaningful way, um,
Hmm.
and then also the homestead. But then, Ladles of Love, they sort of scale went um, increased incredibly,
Yeah.
and therefore we suddenly started to realize that the produce that we could yield from our small space wasn't having a big impact on them. So we decided to rather concentrate just on the homestead, which is a
Hmm.
fantastic organization here in Cape Town, and they run a few programs, but one of which is a house for about 20 young men who are young adults and who are either finishing school or starting their adult life. And the produce that we could harvest on a weekly basis is meaningful in terms of the food that they could themselves cook and use. Um, so
Wow.
they are the beneficiary, and I'm very pleased to report that we've got a close relationship with them, and I recently had to hire a garden custodian, and I offered up the role to their beneficiaries, and yeah, I think we'll speak about that later. But it was nice how I came across one of their youths, and we ended up um, creating a job for him in a different project, but. Yeah, just nice to dovetail. So not only are they, getting our produce, but working with them and actually getting them to come in and learn about gardening itself has also been really meaningful.
Yes. I want to acknowledge there is somebody or two people that joined us on Instagram. Sometimes there's more, but they don't comment necessarily. Suraya Kippy, and then Candy, I think it's Candy Graham. But Suraya says, very interesting, would love to educate our youth to get business minded, hustle, thus kidspreneurs. So I think I will get you in touch with Suraya. Um, and then Deborah Lucas has just come through and said, lovely, inspiring for Canadians. So we do have a global audience that's here. So those that don't know Ladles of Love, I hope I said that correctly. Um, then Soraya also said finding their why should be instilled in our kiddos, purpose driven. Soraya Kippy is an ex-principal who's worked kind of globally, but she's back in South Africa. She's still doing work alongside her husband, who's also a principal, Hilton. So I'll connect the two of you, or the three of you, I should say, and see
Mm.
how you can take this to schools potentially. But do
Yeah.
tell us a bit about Ladles of Love, and then we can carry on, because I'd love to just delve in more around the concept of today, is that nurturing relationships which multiply in this ripple effect. You've already just told us how it's impacting lives. And if you're impacting one individual in a household, you're actually changing not just that person's life, you're changing that entire household. And they can pay that forward within their community or within their family. So do speak more. And thank you, Deborah, for your comments and for being here from Canada.
Well, exactly. And I think to your point about rippling impact, that's that's what's been our approach in terms of the type of people who we accept into our program, because so often we find these people and they're so community minded and they're passionate and they're giving of themselves entirely. So they have amazing impact, but sometimes, or actually often, they're running so close to the wire that it's not sustainable in terms of they're not looking after themselves. They sometimes, if the funding of the project runs out, they dip into their own funding and they self-fund, and that impacts them negatively. And so our approach is that if we can help them take care of themselves a little bit, and also their business skills and things like that, then their impact that they have and the ripple effect that they have in their community is more sustaining and sustainable. And also, that's saying to do good, you need to do well. So we want to make sure the story that, they're role models in their communities. We want to make sure that then they're having a good triple bottom line, if you want to call it that they're not only having an environmental and a social, but they're also having a good economic impact.
Sure. So for those that don't know, I mentioned just briefly earlier that my path crossed with Ian in a crazy way, because I met a lady at a 10-day silent retreat, Thule, and you don't talk at these retreats, but somehow I felt energetically connected to her. It was winter and we went silent and I could see she was getting cold and I gave her these gloves. And why I'm sharing that level of the story is because I think it was weeks or months later, we reconnected, and not having said much words, even on the day that we broke our silence, but she took it upon herself to pay it forward. So there's another example of nurturing relationships which multiply, because she then introduced me to Ian and said, I can't necessarily take on this group coaching partnership with Grow South Africa and Ian. Are you available? And I think Ian and I picked up on a call, and I just gave him an overview of who I am and what my value systems are. And we connected, I suppose, instantly. And I'm very grateful to say that I have been privileged and honored to be a part of this movement that he so beautifully created and continues to grow and cultivate. So the Grow South Africa alumni and cohorts that I've been exposed to, it is just phenomenal to see their impact in their communities. And I was telling Ian earlier on how I was reading the elevator pitch of one of the ladies, Gail, who is a senior, who also just started during COVID, and they were going hungry themselves. And so these stories is what we connect to meaningfully. And then Ian shared earlier on about another guy that he was interviewing. So I love the fact that there's not much about hustling. It's about solving a problem and how to find a solution to that problem. But along the journey, there are pain points, right?
Yeah.
So I'll read Soraya's message here on Instagram again. She says, brilliant idea, ladles of love. I heard about them. I work with schools and youth and will instill in them to start their own urban gardens. Oh, I think you've got a fan already there, Ian. But let's get back to those points of pain. You highlighted some of what the alumni goes through in terms of resources and, access to it, but do talk about both your pain points as well as theirs, and generally in the ecosystem, what happens.
Yeah, so as a consultant and as a landscape architect, if I think to the pain points that often people come to me with, it's the daunting process of starting a garden in general, because there's so many factors to consider. Are you trying to boost the bird life or the ecosystem in your community? Are you trying to conserve water? Are you trying to grow food? Are you trying to create a sanctuary? So there's so many different points to consider. And also, if a husband and wife own a property, they might actually have different priorities coming in. So actually understand how they want to use their external space sometimes is complicated. And then some people believe that they don't have green fingers, so they don't know where to start or even what to prioritize. But also I believe that a food garden, well, we've started calling them a shamba, which is the Swahili word for vegetable garden.
What is it called? Just repeat that.
A shamba.
A shamba. You're going to have to go into the comments and we'll put it in there so we can educate ourselves.
Yeah, but what I've kind of started calling them like an urban shamba, and a definition of an urban shamba is a space that yields food, but also is a beautiful space to be in. Because edible gardens are, they take usually about 3 times the amount of maintenance compared to a normal garden. So you could see that as extra work, or you can see that as more time that you're going to be in that space. And so it's my view that if you are going to spend such time in that space, it must be a beautiful space to be in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You see, that's what I was saying earlier on, is that everything you do is heart-based, right? Because when we lead with the heart, we lead with love, and we lead with kindness, and all of that goes in terms of the energy of that space, which can only manifest so much more from that space. And I think that's why the program Grow South Africa has been successful, and all these other partnerships continue to be successful, because you're doing it for the greater good, not just for serving your own purpose or your own goals and building this legacy for yourself. It is about creating that for others as well. Now, what do you think then is the support that's lacking, and what do you need specifically, or what does this cohorts or partnerships that you've developed need to make this a bit more far-reaching, the impact of what it already is?
So that's a good question. I feel as though the support that's missing sometimes is, well, partly it's the candidate's ability to tell their own story and to actually find the right platform and to do so. Because I think that once you find the right platform, as you have done right here, to tell your stories, it starts to show your audience the type of values that you, as an entrepreneur, hold. And I think that people connect to those, and they connect to stories so much more than just your product or your service.
Yes.
I'm a service provider, you're a service provider, but if there's a farmer and he's doing, or she's doing, radishes and carrots, but she's got an amazing story about how all of her waste material she composts, and she gives the compost to the farmer next door who lost their house in a fire. Just knowing that story as an example, it would change the way I would rather buy the carrots from the lady and knowing that story than the farmer next door who just sells the same carrots.
I agree completely. So if what I'm hearing you say is potentially more mentors in this space, more people putting up their hand and saying, well, we're here and we're willing to pay it forward in support, because we know it has such a ripple effect in multiplying that impact if I do put my hand up. But how do we get those stories out there? I mean, I've worked with some of the alumni, and we spoke about Gail again earlier on and this morning. I mean, these stories touch my heart, and they stay with me. And I work with different cohorts and different entrepreneurs. And this is the first time I'll say it, and I've said it offline, but I'd like to just put it out there. It's been one of the most rewarding cohorts that I've worked in, simply because I get to feel and experience these stories. How do we then create a platform? And where do you believe we should create this platform outside of just the ring-fenced environment that you operate in? Is it this?
Yeah, that's such a cool. I'm glad this topic's come out, because I have also been noticing this. People want to volunteer and to help and to support. And where I find this could align nicely is, creating. We're wanting to expand our mentorship program, but almost the word mentor isn't maybe right. But basically, if we can build a little ecosystem around each of our candidates or each of our alumni, that the people can actually volunteer and help them from a storytelling perspective, and they can do that from anywhere in the world. I find that it's so much easier to tell someone else's story, because I don't know, let's face it, I find it quite cringy to to boast my own skill set. But if I meet someone and I'm inspired by them and I learn about their story, it's so much easier to tell that story and to help them refine it and simplify it. And so sometimes it just takes that external party or that fresh set of eyes to tap in and help them refine and simplify their story.
So I have an idea, and this is just coming to me like at this point based on what you said. Those that know me, I don't rehearse these conversations. It just flows. There's questions and we go with some if it's appropriate. But I'm just intrigued because it's the same thing that I asked you before we went live. Do you want to tell your own bio or share your own bio? And you were like, no, it's okay, you read it. And there is this cringe feeling connected to it. But when we're inspired, rightfully so, we want to share that story so that others can feel inspired as well. How about we think about maybe you coming on again and bringing the different cohorts or alumni on, and we can do more than one there. We can have up to 10 in studio, so we could have quite easily another 8 people here. And it maybe becomes not so much a elevator pitch that they're doing, but an opportunity for them to share, and maybe you kickstart the story and for them to then lead and follow, because we also need to make sure that we become enablers and that there isn't the codependency in the relationship, because otherwise it's not sustainable in the long run. So maybe this could be a way just to be a catalyzer for them, so that they can create the agency. And I know you love talking about agency that they need. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe we could think about that.
I love that idea, and perhaps we can arrange them into, some of them are service providers and some of them are product providers. They sell products. So maybe we could even arrange them into like 2 subgroups like that.
Absolutely.
And then coming back to your idea, and I think that what other people are asking, how can they help? And your involvement. So when you stepped in, and we started the coaching program, it was so great to see the way that it changed the interconnections and the relationships between the candidates. And then you remember this, the second year with you, we moved the coaching to the start of the journey.
Yes.
And the impact that had is that it made the bond between the group so much stronger. So at the end of the 4 weeks, what we're planning this year is to almost have a mini, not a graduation ceremony, but a little ceremony where each of them will get an opportunity to do their 1 minute pitch.
I
And
love it.
I don't know how we're going to do it, but it would be a nice opportunity for people who are involved to come and meet them, or maybe we need to do it in a virtual way. But then people can learn their stories and basically partner up with the candidates.
I'm loving that. And it would be good to also bring all the alumni to that as well. I think it's just that feeling of community and belongingness. And I think Soraya is just saying she's engrossed in this chat. Love it too. So we could bring in other players as well and make this really an exciting but a non stressful, because it can be quite stressful if they feel like they're on stage and they're going to have to rehearse too much. It has to be quite natural and authentic. So we need to bring that essence in as well for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can take that, I suppose, offline. But I love the idea, and we can certainly look at expanding on it so that the impact is even greater. What I want to get to now is sort of some of the challenges and lessons in your own journey, Ian. What have you learned thus far that have been, you can't say that you regret that it happened, because if it wasn't that it happened, it wouldn't be where you are today, right? Every experience is an opportunity for growth. But tell me about some of that tangible stuff that you had to grow through on your journey.
Yeah, I was thinking back to this, and one of my early coaches, she stressed the importance of interweaving between the different hats and the different roles that you play.
Yes.
And I feel like that's really served me well, that advice, and it speaks to our theme as well. The relationships that multiply.
Yeah.
Nurturing your relationship with your clients. What does that look like? It also means educating them in all the different things that you're involved with, because if you've got a good relationship with your client, the easiest sell is to somebody who's bought from you already and who's been happy with your service. So if you can then find ways to educate them as to all the other things that you're involved with, or other parts of your network that are relevant, that means that you can keep strengthening the relationship by either providing them with more services or products, or by benefiting them by connecting them with someone who they might be looking for to employ someone, and of someone, and so you can fit the key in the door like that.
Yeah. But what were some of your, as my coach supervisor Colleen calls it, fail for all I learned? What were some of those during the last, maybe take us back from 2019 to now? What were those deep dive lessons that you're grateful for and that you don't have resentment for today?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, okay, let's talk about the Octopus Garden. So we designed that in a way so that the garden could evolve, and it was designed to be able to be dismantled and removed, and in a way that was a great success because it did happen. But in another way, I can't say that it was a failure, but it was so flexible that it changed, and it almost like it reached its peak, and then just as it reached its peak, we changed it so quickly. And so the highlight or the heyday of the garden wasn't very long before it changed. And I've been recently looking back at photos of it and going like, oh, wow, it was such a beautiful space. It's so sad that we didn't get to celebrate it longer before we changed it. Look, there was a pandemic that's kind of happened, so that was outside of our control. But looking back, I mean, we we hardly were able to enjoy it at its prime before it cut up and changed. They say that change is the only constant, and I'm pleased to report that as of today, we are now just starting to renovate the garden to actually include a whole new building, which has been created out of waste material from the waterfront. So that's been an amazing ethos alignment. And, you know, we were making a garden out of recycled material, and then now that's led to a whole building that's led. So that's totally within the ethos, and it's within there for the project's legacy. And now we're having to adapt. But
Ian, I don't know if it's my side.
Oh,
is it my side? Because the signal is breaking up.
Oh, sorry. It's
my side or your side?
I think it's on your side.
My side, probably.
Yeah.
It's showing full bars, but I hope that for those that are here, Suraya or Candy, can you hear Ian perfectly so that I know that it's not on my side, or if it's on Ian's side, so we can maybe try and fix that. You're coming and going, so it's just your sound and part of what you're saying is a bit distorted, but for the gist, I can make out most of it.
Sorry about that. It looks
No, it's fine. I didn't want to let you lose your train of thought there, but so now you're saying present day the garden's going to be evolving into let's see. Okay, no, that was another comment there. I was thinking somebody responded to say if they can hear us. I want to talk about eco bricks as well, because that business model is also very different, and how that's also supported this entire journey and multiplying relationships. But you were talking about something that is close and near and dear to my heart as well, is these collaborative partnerships where there is synergy and where you can see that the two can work together, because often entrepreneurs like to keep things close to their heart and they don't necessarily share for fear of ideas being stolen or whatever the case may be. And that then takes them into a slow to execution or implementation than what they could have if they had just considered that joint venture partnership. So what I want you to touch on, Ian, is really just, and then the other thing before I lose my train of thought as well, is that you spoke about not celebrating that milestone long enough. And what I do find is that is a disadvantage to many entrepreneurs, is that they don't celebrate the milestones even in between in pursuit of the greater purpose. And then they almost feel disempowered and disenfranchised and like I didn't achieve much. But actually, you've just gone back and said, that was really awesome. And could we not have just embraced that for a little bit longer? Do you find that is also a mindset that is holding people back, holding entrepreneurs back? So I know I've asked you multiple things right now. So recapping, celebrating milestones for longer. You got it.
Yeah. No, and I'm going to go with the freshest thing first, because I think looking back to that and realizing that I didn't pause to celebrate and that achievement enough. I think so often as entrepreneurs, we're running between different projects and we're trying to sort out what's urgent and what's important. And so then we're so busy running after those things that, stopping to pause and to really celebrate and to really take stock of something feels like a luxury. But it's actually so important to bank it and to celebrate it and to honor the achievements. I feel like that's been a big lesson. But coming back to the other part of your question, the sort of eco-brick side of things. So for the listeners who don't know, an eco-brick is a plastic bottle which is used as a capsule in which you compress small and soft unrecyclable plastic pieces. And using a stick, you compress it down. So you encapsulate a lot of small pieces of plastic, which often find their way into the water and break down into microplastics. So in 2013, I co-founded an organization called EcoBrick Exchange. And at the time, our mission was to use these EcoBricks to build schools. So as, taking a few challenges like the need for shelter and the need for schooling, another challenge of waste management, and then packaging those things into a building resource that then can be used as a solution. And back then it was a different time, and so people didn't know about the concept, and also the awareness of the plastic pollution problem wasn't as great as it is today. And so it was a really interesting project, and we used it as a way to change the way people thought about and manage their waste. So I jokingly call it the recycling gateway drug, because it's got this catalytic effect of if you start eco-bricking, you see that your waste output immediately halves, and then it makes you curious. We're like, oh well, why don't now that this is going so well, why don't I start recycling everything that I can recycle, and maybe composting all my food waste, and all of a sudden you barely have any waste at all. And that was our experience. And it led to this more sort of holistic lifestyle and a simpler lifestyle. And I think coming back to your point about lessons learned through challenges, the EcoBrick project, at that stage our initial goal was to collect 6,000 EcoBricks to build a particular project. And it was quite a big ask to get people to take these different habits and homes. So we trialed 3 different systems at once, thinking that maybe one or the other would work, and they kind of all worked. And it created a challenge, because once we reached our 6,000 target, people didn't stop. And in fact,
it's a nice problem to have.
Yeah.
That was an awesome problem to have.
Exactly. And it meant that we had to then start innovating. And actually what we found is that to create a building is a long and expensive project. And even if you can have a 20 or 30% cost saving in using innovative materials, it's still a long and arduous process. Versus a little kid who makes an eco-brick is excited, and then they want to quickly take the next step. And so we found that it was important to offer a range of smaller and quicker applications. And so that's why we started using them to build raised bed vegetable gardens, as well as furniture range. So I've designed a range of sort of flat pack, almost IKEA inspired kits that people can get these kits, and then they use their own eco-bricks, and they make a bench or a table, so that they can maintain the momentum that was created.
Ian, this is so inspiring for me. And I mean, I know the story, but hearing us have this conversation with such depth and seeing you light up as you talk about it, and this passion and energy that goes with it. I mean, as a little kid, did you always know, like, you wanted to pay it forward and serve for the greater good of humanity and the environment? Was this something instinctively from a kid that you could point out a time and share with us that was a turning point for you to say, that's what I'm going to do?
That's interesting. I think I was very lucky to have had immersive experiences in nature as a kid. And I think that's something that we shouldn't take for granted, because it is a privilege. And, to be able to go on walks on the mountain, in the forest, on the beaches, not everyone gets to do that, and not every child gets to do that. And I'm so grateful. My parents gave me a wonderful start to life. But I do remember, feeling that, going on river cleanups and things like that, and seeing this problem about how, plastic doesn't really fit in with our environment well. And then in school, I was also introduced to Habitat for Humanity, and we were welcomed into communities, and we could actually actively participate in initially building someone's house, but then later actually the process of fundraising to help these houses to be built. And I just felt so in my purpose doing that, and it's sort of being of service. That it was, and I, up until that point, I hadn't really found a passion. Like, I love gardening, but I wasn't that into sports. I would pretend to play rugby, and I would be dreaming about gardens and nature and things like that. So then getting that experience through Habitat for Humanity, it really awakened me to sort of a purpose, if you will.
And hats off to your parents. I think with the digital age that we live in right now, I also want to acknowledge you, because I think I bumped into you twice, maybe, at one of the beautiful locations in Cape Town called Newlands Forest. For those that want to visit Cape Town, please do go and look up Newlands Forest. It's one of my favorites. I don't live that side of the world now, but I certainly do like to make the most of it. And so I have seen you just being free with your own kids as well, and your boy with this energetic and jumping in the mud. And you were just so chilled when I saw you that day with Ilse, your wife. And it's like, it didn't matter if he was wetting you or getting people met. He was just in his element, in his essence. So I just want to acknowledge you for nurturing that. And we're talking about nurturing relationships which multiply, because what you're doing is you are doing the same for him or your kids at this very young age, and they can continue sort of the legacy of serving others. And whatever the context may be, we're not necessarily saying our kids must follow everything that we're doing, but it's that principle of service, that value system, I should rather say. So I want to acknowledge that from my side to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, what's on my mind? We've got two small boys, but what's on my mind is that we've got them now, we've got their attentions now, but we're gonna lose them to the digital realm in the next few years. And how do we make nature and being involved in nature so captivating that it's more enticing to be involved with actively in terms of behavior and hobbies and things like that, as opposed to just being on a screen. And I know it's a battle that I'm probably going to lose, but I think there is a lot of opportunities and using nature to invoke curiosity. I love that. Was it you? I think you were saying that earlier, but you can't be in a curious mindset and in a judgmental mindset at the same time. Yeah,
the brain's not designed to be in those two opposites at the same time. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that we can involve that in the upbringing of our children. But the other thing, the most impactful thing about my junior school childhood is that we once had this project where we were given like a meter square of land, and we had to farm that land. And at the end of the term, we harvested all the produce that we'd grown, and we made this big salad together as a class. And it was the most delicious meal that I've, as a child that I had, and it made me curious about these different types of vegetables, and it made me try different vegetables that I'd never tried before. And it was this experience. And it's, yeah, and so I think if we can try create that similar experience for the young ones around us today, I think it could have such a massive impact.
So we're going on to the vision of the future, but I actually think you hit something, you're kind of hitting on something here. Because as parents globally, the world over, we are struggling with this digital realm. And you so beautifully articulated that if we can make it captivating and magical for kids to kind of reintegrate back into nature, but I think it also needs to be the parents, because we ourselves are so sucked into this digital realm. And yes, we're having a live here today because of digital, but we need to understand how are they enablers versus being disenabling us, right? I don't know if that's the correct way of phrasing it, but you're looking at something that you could put something together in a problem you're wanting to solve. I think you're onto something that could be another business for you to start. How does that sound as part of the vision for the future?
Yeah, I think you'll have to be a co-creator then. But yeah, it is intriguing. And I mean, my sister-in-law, she often challenges me. She says, we're not human doings, we're human beings. And in the weekends, I often like to see how we can get into like a state or a flow state or a creative space, rather than just, filling our weekends with things to do and people to see, to do. But if you can actually say like, oh, this weekend I want to embrace curiosity in the garden, and I don't know what that's going to look like, and maybe it's going to involve cleaning out the worm farm and seeing if we can turn the worm manure into worm tea, and then if we can share that with our neighborhood. But to embrace a state, rather, I want to feel curious in my garden, or I want to actively learn by doing something in my garden, or with a vegetable that I've never eaten before, and I want to see if I can make an interesting recipe with that.
I like the idea of co-creating this because it is a big systemic problem. It's a systemic problem where adults are using technology as babysitters. I'm going to put up my hand. I've been there. I have a 17-year-old son, a 13-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old son. I'm curbing the 9-year-old now because I've seen the damage it's done to the other two in terms of that addiction, right? I don't believe little ones. I think we could actually make them the co-creators of how to make it exciting and magical and captivating to entice kids to come out to play. Because let's go back to your story. All of this started in that young essence when nobody could actually tell you were playing, pretending to play rugby, but your heart and your soul was actually in the gardening. So intuitively and innately, it was always there. So kids have that. I feel the bigger problem to solve is how do we get adults then out to play, potentially, and make it exciting and enticing for them by, I suppose, leveraging the kids. So I'm not trying to solve the problem here, but I'm just saying that it is such a big systemic problem, and you've got this secret recipe in figuring out how to nurture relationships that multiply impact. So all I'm suggesting is let's revisit this potentially then in solving this big global problem about devices, and that the other part, also the digital divide, which is another conversation. But
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? Do you think we need to go to sort of root cause? Root cause, I'm thinking roots, the roots. We're talking your language again.
Sure.
Because it starts with the adults.
I went to an event last week on Environmental Day, and
Yes.
it was there. It was actually at the waterfront, and the waterfront sort of announced a new campaign they called Our Better Nature.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. It was speaking about how, in the early, the 2000s and in the last 10 years, you've seen a lot of shocking imagery to get your attention, to then hopefully influence your behavior change.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're seeing it as, actually, we all have it in us we want what's good for our children. We want things to be good. And so actually to appeal to people's better nature, that we are all inherently good. And if we can access, that, and if we can remember that, then we can and see how we can still be self-compassionate, and then we can only do our best. But if we apply our minds to ourselves, what all can we actually do within our lives? And it's not big things. Sometimes it's small things. It's choices that we make. It's the lifestyles that we live. It's the way we have a good time, the way we share with others. It was one of those rippling little things that you hear, and then it starts to get inside your head and make you think differently. I'll share it's a really beautiful passage they wrote about the campaign. I'll share it to you.
We'd love that.
Yeah.
So, I was kind of spearheading where I think the vision must go, but tell us more on what is your vision for the future to continue multiplying and nurturing these relationships that impact. What's happening?
I'd say my vision is that we need to slow down. We need to value communications, and actually human communications through, sometimes it is through digital, and that's amazing. But if we all embrace storytelling and communication, I feel as though we can really boost our networks, and in a meaningful way. And in that way, we can also listen out to what's happening in our networks, and we can partner up, and we can have a better sense of partnership and actual collaboration.
I love that. And I told you, we're at the top of the hour, and it doesn't feel like it was an hour. You might have felt that, what are we going to talk in that hour? But we've just told stories. We've shared exchanges of passions and inspiration, and how these partnerships come together. What is one or two gems you want to leave the audience with? And then I'd like you to also tell them how can they reach you if they want to collaborate with you to continue expanding on this impact work that you're doing.
Okay, I think the question that I have for people is how they view what their external space can do for them. I've got an assessment that I share with my people coming in, and it helps you to actually rate 14 different functions of how you can use your external space. And I think that there's so much untapped potential that people aren't aware of, that they can get into. And then I guess to overcome that notion of that people either have green fingers or they don't. I think that's such a false. I feel like it's such a false narrative, because it actually just comes down to confidence and following curiosity. You either succeed, you grow a flower, you grow a carrot, or you learn. And what can go wrong in growing a head of lettuce? Maybe it'll die. Maybe it'll die and then become compost in the soil. Is that actually soothing?
So it's a win-win overall. There's no loss. I love that. That's beautiful.
The other thing is that I really want to stress, and this an old adage, but they say that you should spend 80% of your energy in the soil and boosting the soil health. If you consider the soil almost like your gut health, there's this connection between soil health, your gut health, and then your mental health. We can't, it's hard to see what's happening under the soil, but in making sure that you don't use pesticides and you try not use like chemical-based fertilizers, but you boost the soil through, adding compost and maybe getting a worm farm, producing worms, and to make sure that your soil is covered. You don't leave good soil exposed to the sun. Look at the forest. We've been in the forest together. Look at the forest floor. You never see exposed soil to the sun. It's always covered in a thick layer of plants or trees.
Ian, that is a beautiful call to action to close off today with, is to say that we all need to bring our part in some way. And it's not about doing, it's about being and becoming and leading by example and really walking the walk and not just talking it. So that's really what I got out of today's conversation. And what I also got out of today was, let's listen to understand so that we can find those gems of how we may be able to collaborate together. I think sometimes we come with our own agendas and our own egos and wanting to grow our own legacies, and we forget that, what's that old saying? If we go, I can't remember it exactly, but if we go at it alone, something like to go slower, but if we go together, what is that saying again?
Yeah.
Do you know what it's?
I do know that one, but it's not coming to me. But I know that there's no I in team. That's the other one.
Yeah, it's the African proverb, goes together further, something to that. If I can't even remember it, but
as Africans,
thank
we've
you.
done it badly. But I know exactly what you're talking about.
We have done it badly, but it's the spirit of Ubuntu as well, So on that note, stay with me. I'm going to end the live, but we'll do a quick debrief afterwards. Thank you. I want to thank you, Ian, for sharing these beautiful stories, for continuing with your passion, your energy, your complete beingness and love for humanity and the environment is just so refreshing. And I really do feel privileged to cross paths with such an incredible human. And it's not flattery. There's a lot that would say the same, I'm sure. So I'm going to ask you just to share your final greetings, and then I'll end the live on both the Instagram and on LinkedIn.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anissa. And likewise, I've really enjoyed getting to know you and also getting to work with you. I think, seeing the impact that you've had on our program and our cohorts, I've been going through the feedback we've been getting, and so many people have just loved and expressed how much they've loved working with you and how you help them to connect to themselves again. That's been really amazing. And yeah, it's so great to have you in partnership in this program and to look ahead at the community that we're forming together.
Thank you for that. I receive it, and I'm just happy to be a vessel on their journeys as well. So thank you for continuously inviting me back there. On that note, thank you. I'm going to end. It's 1 hour and 3 minutes, believe it or not. But we're going to see him again. We'll see Ian and the alumni again. Bye for now. So you can stay on, Ian. I'll end.